I'm Stuart Taylor and I make videos about project management. If that's your thing, make sure to subscribe. Today I'm going to share with you how much I've earned in various project management roles, including how much I got paid as a project manager, in PMO, in portfolio assurance, as a permanent staff member, and as a contractor. I'll refer to gross values for consistency, but just keep in mind that the tax paid by contractors and perms tend to be a bit different. The roles are all UK based, but I'll share US dollar values too. And as we're looking at, in some cases, values from over a decade ago, I'll show the values adjusted for inflation up until the end of 2021. We start off early in my career, and as you'd expect, the amounts I get paid tend to be on an upward direction, though there have been a few bumps on the way. In 2008, I joined Walsall Council, where I worked as a project officer and had my first formal project manager role with some close supervision. The location was Walsall in the West Midlands, which is quite far away from London, where the highest rates are paid in all sectors. The starting salary was £27,000. It was funny, but as living costs in Walsall for a single man were quite low, this was a good income. I still managed to spend it all, but you're only young once. By the time I left in 2010, my salary had risen to just over £30,000. In 2010, I joined the National Health Service, working for various trusts as a project manager, starting with NHS Warwickshire. This was the first time I was an independent project manager. The project, however, didn't go well, as a change in government that year led to policy changes that invalidated the business case and closed my project. The salary here was an increase, but it wasn't a great move. It was £31,000 per year. The role was based in Warwick, which is a much more expensive city than Walsall, so I continued to live and commute from Walsall. The increased travel and parking costs meant that additional £1,000 just disappeared. Overall, it was a poor career choice to go there at the time that I did, but I did meet my future wife there, so I can't complain too much. The next longer term role came a few months later in 2011 with NHS Direct, where I worked as a project manager on a fixed term contract. What that means is you have similar benefits and salary as a permanent employee, but with an end date like a contractor. Basically, it's the risk of a contractor with the salary of a perm. The worst of both worlds. But it's not unusual to see these types of contracts in project management, owing to the temporary nature of the projects. My contract was for 6 months and I got extended twice. The starting salary was around the same as the previous role at NHS Warwickshire. I started the role living in Walsall and working in nearby Dudley, which was a less expensive commute than Warwick. But after a few months, I made a big move and relocated south to Milton Keynes, a town based close to London. NHS Direct had an office in Milton Keynes, so transferring location was fine, but I was now living in a location that was much more expensive than Walsall. Noticeably, I'd moved from a rented 2-bedroom house to a rented 2-bedroom apartment that cost 3 times as much. The idea of this move was to enhance my future wife's career prospects in fashion retail, which it did, and soon enough the living costs were shared and we could cope with the increase. After a year with NHS Direct, I transferred to a different project within the trust with a different sponsor, whose first action was to give me a pay rise. What can I say? He's a great boss and he recognises talent when he sees it and knows how to reward it. I'd name check him, but he doesn't watch my videos. Just kidding. Thanks, Keith. Thanks to Keith's generosity, my salary increased in 2012 to £35,000. Before I continue, I just want to explain briefly why I'm doing this. Simply put, I want to encourage people into a career in project management, but I want to do it honestly. So that means being transparent about the ups and the downs, and it also means being open about things like salary. The truth is, the annual reports on salary only offer averages and they never show the full ranges. There have been times in my career where I've been below the average, and there have been times when I've been above it, and usually I'm fine with that. Anyway, if this is proving useful or just interesting, then make sure to give the video a like. I changed sectors in 2013 to start a permanent role with the Royal Bank of Scotland. I joined the role as an assurance analyst, but they restructured the team about 2 weeks later, and I was converted into being, for the first time, a PMO lead. The bank had a central PMO department that defined standards, so I was just operating as a satellite PMO, doing my best to ensure adherence to those standards. The important thing here is it was in the banking sector, which pays more than the public sector. And it was in central London, based in an office just outside of Angel Station in vibrant Islington. I loved it there. I didn't relocate to London though, but I did move closer to the very upmarket historical city of St Albans. My 2013 salary with RBS for being a PMO lead was £45,000. I loved the job and I enjoyed working with the people there, but I didn't feel I was appreciated. So I looked into a move into contracting, a move that I detailed in the very clickbaity titled video, How I Doubled My Salary by Becoming a Contractor, which I shall link in the description. The next role. Wow, in 2014, I left my permanent job for a 5-week contract with Barclays Bank to work in a very similar PMO lead role. The role was based in London, this time amongst the towers of Canary Wharf. This role paid £550 per day. After the initial contract, I was extended on a longer term contract, which paid a little less at £500 per day. The gross annual pay as a contractor PMO lead at Barclays in 2014 was £110,000. Don't forget, contractors calculate tax differently. That's outside the scope of this video, but I will address it in a future video. What I found though was that I'd hit a sweet spot. I noticed there were project managers under a hell of a lot more stress than me on a similar or slightly higher day rate. For me, this was fine. In fact, it was better than fine. I was enjoying the benefits of life-changing increases to my income without the typical increase in stresses and responsibilities that normally accompany such an increase. But what goes up must come down. In late 2015, I picked up enough clues to suggest that Barclays were about to either reduce the contractor cohort or to cut the pay to contractors. So I gave them my notice and looked for the next opportunity, knowing I'd built enough savings to not work for a whole year if necessary. The job market was hot at the time, so I didn't have to wait long. I returned to the Royal Bank of Scotland again in PMO lead capacity, but this time as a contractor. They were working at the time on the separation of the Williams & Glyn Bank from RBS, and it was proving difficult for them. So difficult, in fact, that they eventually abandoned the plan. The role was located near to Bank in central London, an easy commute from where I lived, and was in the midst of some beautiful historical buildings. The big banks are competitive, but the average contractor day rate can vary greatly for doing similar work. I got invited back in 2015 as contractor PMO lead on £450 per day, which worked out as £99,000 per year. I didn't mind the pay cut, to be honest. I was working on a project that really excited me with some really good people. It was a damn shame that it didn't work out and the project was cancelled. By then I'd bought my first house in a town called Chesham, which is just outside of London at the end of the Met Line. I figured, as hundreds of contractors were now flooding the market, it would be a good time to chill out a little, fix up the new house until the market calmed down. I had savings in place to cover 6 months out of work, which should be fine, right? Not really. It took 7 months before I landed the next job. This brings us to 2017, where I took a permanent role as a portfolio assurance partner for the payments company Vocalink. Vocalink were in the process of a merger with Mastercard, so it was a really exciting time. The company were based in Rickmansworth, which was the shortest commute for me since my role at Walsall Council. It seemed like a dream move at the start, but it just didn't work out. There's going to be a whole video dedicated to that experience someday, and you're going to want to get a box of tissues on standby for it. It's tragic. The role of permanent portfolio assurance partner paid £80,000 in 2017. It's a drop from contracting, but the benefits package that I'm not including in this total was significant, especially pension contributions and health insurance. At the end of 2017, just weeks after the birth of my first child, I took a project manager contractor role with Electrocomponents UK distributor RS Components. This role was based in Corby, which is further north in Northamptonshire. I wasn't prepared to relocate for a short-term contract, and it was a 2-hour drive each way, so I spent some time each week living in a hotel in Corby. I really missed my young family a lot during this period, and the only compensation was I was working for a good friend and enjoyed his company in that time away from home. This period is so recent there's no point in doing inflation adjustments. The rate was £550 per day, which worked out as £120,000 per year. It gave me the chance to rebuild my savings after the period of unemployment before Vocalink, in a way that permanent work never can. Once again, I was cash rich, so naturally I went and spent it on a bigger house in Chesham. In October 2018, I took a permanent role as the PMO lead at AmTrust, a multinational insurance company based opposite the Gherkin in the City of London. A very easy commute on the increasingly less reliable Met Line. In this case, PMO lead meant everything it meant everywhere else, and now it included having some other PMOs to hire, train and manage. It also meant creating a PMO department from scratch, which was an exciting challenge. Salary took a dip again here to $70,000 per year, but it came with a decent benefits package. Comparably on the market at the time, it was on the low end of the scale for the role and responsibilities. I did receive approaches from recruiters to consider roles that were paying between 10 and 20% more, but I felt that moving on so quickly wasn't the right thing to do, and that I wanted to do what I could for AmTrust first. As 2020 started though, I was ready to move on, and I wasn't sure quite what I wanted to move on to, as I was completely burned out, not just with AmTrust, but with project management itself. I gave my notice and just didn't know what I wanted to do next. Take a good long break and rest, or ensure burnout, get a contractor role and just enjoy the pay. Neither of those things happened. We all know what happened in 2020. This brings us up to date. I'm not going to share details about my current role and salary because doing that in a current role can cause problems in teams, so you're just going to have to wait. And hopefully you'll have to wait for a really long time because I do like where I'm working at the moment and the team that I'm with. However, when the time comes to move on, I'll make sure to watch this video over here because, well, who wouldn't want to double their salary? Oh, it's so clickbaity.